how much lower can dollar go?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. Of course, it depends against which currency. We tend to calibrate it in our heads a lot against the euro. That, of course, being the currency pair that's traded the most. And of course, what we've seen in the euro and many other currencies, the Aussies coming to mind, the New Zealand's coming to mind, is strength in their own right, really, over the last 6 to 7 months. The Aussie, the New Zealand dollars overnight, both really surging. But they have, pretty good economies. The Australian employment data, again, surging for about the 5th or the 6th consecutive month. We've seen really strong growth from New Zealand. Of course, they have both economies which have really managed this pandemic well. And once they've closed their borders and certain sectors are hurting because of that, they're performing, really quite well compared with some of the countries in Europe and the US.
Jane, I'm going to introduce a chart in the next block on dollar Canada. Right now, I want to talk about the blended all-in index, the DXY index. Folks, it's really confusing about 3, 4, 5 blended indexes that pros like Jane Foley use every day. On DXY, Jane, I could literally teach a course on its elegance, and it's what's called gamma convex. It's a log chart with increasing acceleration to a weaker dollar, rather. Should we be concerned about the gamma out there in that blended big currency index?
Well, we should perhaps be concerned, but we should also be aware that the DXY index specifically is very heavily biased towards euro-dollar. The weighting of euro-dollar is absolutely enormous. So from that point of view, I think you can be better off looking at a different index, some of the more effective index. For instance, there's the Bloomberg one or the one from the Bank of International Settlements. But the DXY is tradable, and perhaps that's why people do look at it so closely. But to be honest, whichever dollar index you're looking at now, you are going to see dollar weakness. Right. And the Fed has been really successful, I think, at manipulating that this year.
Jane, we've had a 4 standard deviation move on the Bloomberg dollar index off of the election. Let's call a pivot November 3, November 4. These are abrupt moves. How abrupt are they for other nations dealing with the new weak dollar America?
It's, I do think that this is a real significant event, perhaps even a disruptive event for many different central banks. Now, they're not all going to roll over and take this. Nobody wants a weak currency, an environment where you have very little inflation, and in a world where we see, elevated levels of unemployment, perhaps, low levels of wage inflation. Nobody wants a stronger currency. So, yes, the Fed has got the biggest balance sheet. Perhaps it's got the most power, therefore, to push over the dollar. But other central banks will also be pushing back with quantitative easing policies, particularly, and maybe more negative interest rates, perhaps. So they won't necessarily roll over. They will push against the weaker dollar. But the Fed perhaps has got that biggest balance sheet.